With the complete subjection of the Indians at the conclusion of the War of 1812, a new era of peace and prosperity appeared to dawn for the city. Fortunately for Detroit and for the territory of Michigan, Lewis Cass, the gallant colonel whose services in the war had been so great, was appointed governor of the territory. Friends of General Hull and his supporters, for he had them, notwithstanding his record as given in this history, had severely criticized Lewis Cass for his active denunciation of Hull. Cass's record as governor and later as Secretary of War were the best answers that could possibly be given to those who thought to tear down his reputation. Coming of good New England stock, Cass developed in the northwestern wilderness where the elder Cass went at the close of the Revolutionary War, having served with honor in that struggle as a major in the Army. Lewis Cass received an excellent education and taught school for several seasons, but to a man of his temperament that life was too slow, and he entered the Army with results already chronicled. The settlers in the West were not obliged to teach him anything. Having been one of them and lived among them, he thought for them. He knew their needs better than many who were given the reins of power in other portions of the country. Besides being a military man, he was well grounded in the law, having studied in the office of Governor R.J. Meigs of Ohio, having been in Detroit during the most strenuous period of its existence, and as an officer having traversed most of the then wilderness, he was familiar with the necessities of the territory he was to govern. Under the peculiar circumstances of location and savage environment, Detroit had never been seriously considered except from a military standpoint and as a fur trading post. Its strategic value had made the place a bone of contention, first between the French and English, and later between Great Britain and the United States. Under the administration of Cass, therefore, a brighter era and a broader scope of development for what is now one of the greatest cities in the United States. At the time Cass assumed the office of governor, the territory of Michigan was still struggling under the burden of these obnoxious laws enacted by the governor and judges subsequent to 1805. One of the first achievements of Governor Cass was to repeal the Woodward Code and to establish a real democratic form of government for Detroit. The work entitled Detroit in Wayne County says that on October 24, 1815, Judges Witherell and Griffin, in conjunction with Governor Cass, adopted an enactment recreating the offices and duties of town trustees. Instead of placing in the hands of the mayor the first municipal authority, this was vested in the chairman of the Board of Trustees, thus doing away with the despotic power before wielded by the chief executive officer of the town. The chairman of the board, instead of being as heretofore an appointee of the mayor, was to be elected by the board and subject to removal by that body at any time its members deemed that action advisable. At the election of November 30th, 1815, the town board was chosen, Solomon Sibley being chairman and Thomas Rowland secretary. This board held office until the election of its successors, which occurred on the first Monday of May, 1816. After that date, these town elections were held annually. The new town board was promptly organized at a meeting held December 4th, 1815, at which time 16 general ordinances were adopted for the government of the community. The last vestige of British power was obliterated by the setting aside of the old English laws, some of which were still in force. In their stead, there was adopted what has been known as the Cass Code. This was ratified and superseded all the laws of the Northwest Territory applicable to Michigan. Although General Cass deemed Detroit of little value at the time he became governor, he speedily realized the splendid possibilities of the territory over which he presided, and especially of the coming metropolis of the state. In addition to the settling of the Indian troubles, Governor Cass, with the courage which characterized his every action, became involved in a very sharp controversy with the British military authorities, who sought in more than one instance an opportunity to exasperate the American people. As late as 1817, the English not only violated American personal rights by stopping travelers, but by holding up and searching Detroit-bound vessels on the Great Lakes. In addition to this, the British forces on the other side of the river were arrogant, aggressive, and belligerent. This attitude on the part of the people on the other side of the river gave rise to a vigorous correspondence between Governor Cass and Colonel James, then in command of the British forces. 9 months later, after the close of the War of 1812, a British lieutenant with a boat's crew entered the territory of the United States within the province of Michigan in search of a deserter from one of their men of war. Several American houses were entered and searched, much to the discomfort of their owners. And the party policed a section of the highway of Michigan and fired on American citizens who declined to stop. The invaders finally found and arrested the deserter, but the behavior of the party had so exasperated the citizens that they flew to arms, turned the tables on the intruders, arrested the lieutenant, and conducted him a prisoner to the fort at Detroit, while the boat's crew made good their escape with the deserter to the man of war. Colonel Miller, whose gallantry as lieutenant during the War of 1812 at Detroit was conspicuous, was in command of the American garrison, but gave up jurisdiction in this matter to Governor Cass as the head of the civil authority. This action of Colonel Miller's was one of the steps which formed a foundation for the aftergrowth and greatness of this country. Governor Cass acted with his usual decision. Commander Owen of the British Navy demanded the return of a lieutenant. Cass, with the people of their territory at his back, acted according to the settled principles of international law. Instead of complying with the demand, the lieutenant was tried, convicted, and fined. The government at Washington was inclined to oblige the British, but the action of Governor Cass was finally upheld. One of the most important events immediately following General Cass's administration was the establishment in 1817 of the University of Michigan and the establishment of Detroit's first permanent newspaper, the Gazette, which appeared on July 25th of that year. Sitting as a legislative body, the governor and judges in August 26, 1817 passed an act which provided for the appropriation of $380 for the establishment of the university. So great was the pride of the pioneers in this new institution that they were willing to make many sacrifices for its maintenance. The act provided for an additional tax of 15%, and just 29 days after the passage of the measure, the cornerstone of the new university was laid upon the northwest side of what is now Bates Street, halfway between Larned and Congress. In addition to these appropriations for the support of this new institution of learning, individual subscriptions were frequently made by many of the prominent citizens of Detroit, and a portion of the funds sent to Detroit for the relief of the fire sufferers of 1805, which had never been distributed, was also added to the university funds. Under the provisions of the Act, which was drawn by Judge Woodward, with the large ideas always entertained by that jurist, the university was to include 13 professorships and was to be known as the Catholepistimade University of Michigan. The youth of the territory were to receive instruction in universal science and literature, embracing all the sciences pertaining to language, natural history, mathematics, chemistry, natural philosophy, astronomy, ethics, economics, medicine, military science, and what was termed intellectual science, which was to embrace the science relative to the minds of animals, to the human mind, spiritual existence, to the deity, and to religion. Before even the cornerstone had been shaped from the rough, the 13 professorships were divided between two men, the president and vice president of the university, Reverend John Monteith, pastor of the Protestant Church, and Reverend Gabriel Richard, Roman Catholic priest of the Diocese of St. Anne's, respectively. In 1818, what is known as the Classical Academy was established under the charge of H.M. Dickey, and in the summer of the same year, James Connor, Oliver Williams, and Benjamin Steed were appointed directors of a Lancasterian school, which opened under the supervision of Lemuel Shattuck, a recent arrival from Massachusetts. The original act creating the university was superseded April 30th, 1821 by an act which placed the affairs of the university in the hands of the governor of the territory and 20 trustees. Many names prominent in the history of Michigan were associated with the institution, which continued at Detroit until its removal to Ann Arbor by an act of the legislature approved March 20th, 1837. One of Governor Cass's greatest ambitions was the settlement of the territory, and as a condition precedent, better means for transportation were necessary. To this end, the governor bent his energies with the result that good highways between Detroit and the settlements of Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana took the place of the rough military roads hewed out of the wilderness. One event which spurred Michigan to action was the forming of the territory of Indiana into the Union, taking a portion of southwestern Michigan with it. It became evident that the building of roads was a necessity, and the federal administration appointed Duncan MacArthur to cooperate with Cass in his undertaking. In 1818, large portions of Ohio and Indiana were ceded to the whites by the Indians. In the same year, Governor Cass impressed upon Congress the necessity of a road around the end of Lake Erie as a highway of commerce, and an actual necessity for military improvements in case of war. Following this, the territory made an appropriation for the construction of a highway between Detroit and Chicago, and a passable wagon road was built. One event of importance which presaged an influx of new blood into Detroit was the appearance of the first steamer on the Great Lakes, the Walk in the Water, which slowly plowed its way through the waters of Lake Erie and the Detroit River to the wonderment of the people who saw its paddle wheels churning the water, while a long trail of black smoke streamed from its funnels. The arrival of the steamer at Detroit, August 27, 1818, was hailed with delight by the inhabitants who saw in its advent another means for the further development of the country. The steamer made regular trips between Detroit and Buffalo and carried both passengers and freight. This development really did mark an era in the history of the city, greatly stimulating immigration from the east and a corresponding increase in the business of the city. When, during the same year, Wisconsin and a part of Minnesota were added to the territory, Governor Cass sought the formation of a legislative assembly. With regard to his efforts in this direction, Andrew C. McLaughlin, in his Life of Lewis Cass, says he adhered with tenacity to the doctrine that the people should have a direct voice in appointments and in other civil affairs of the territory. In the spring of 1819, the people were invited to decide by a general vote whether or not to proceed with the semi-representative form of government guaranteed them under the ordinance by which the territories were governed. The opportunity was not taken advantage of owing to the indifference of the French residents who had not, as yet, become accustomed to all of the benefits of a government of and for the people. The changes wrought in the form of government and restoration of the rights of the people, however, caused an influx of new settlers, and with the consequent increase of business, there came a demand for banking facilities. In answer to this demand, the Bank of Michigan, the second financial institution to be brought to life in Detroit, was formed. The new bank occupied a building at the corner of Jefferson Avenue and Randolph Street and numbered among its stockholders Catherine Navarre and Mary Devereaux, and the following prominent citizens of the city: General Alexander Macomb, Otis Fisher, James Jones, Henry Jackson Hunt, Joseph Campbell, Henry B. Brevoort, John R. Williams, August B. Woodward, Andrew G. Whitney, William Woodbridge, James May, Peter Desnoyers, Ebenezer Sibley, John Anderson, John H. Platt, Barnabas Campau, John J. Deming, William Brown, Philip LeCoyer, and Abraham Edwards. John R. Williams was made the first president of the bank, and James McCloskey cashier. McCloskey served as cashier until succeeded by C.C. Trowbridge, who assumed the office only after McCloskey had been dismissed under accusation of having used the bank's funds for his own purposes. Following the views of Governor Cass, plans were made for immediate disposition of public lands. This, however, was hindered by a change in allotment by the federal government of land set apart for soldiers. Under a misapprehension, reports sent to Washington that Michigan was little else than a barren waste found believers in the government, and soldier settlers were diverted to Missouri and other western territory outside of Michigan. To counteract this state of affairs, a land corporation known as the Pontiac Land Company was formed, having as stockholders most of those mentioned as interested in the Bank of Michigan. This company acquired a large tract of land in Pontiac County adjacent to and including the present city of Pontiac. According to a business directory of Detroit compiled in 1819, there were in the city watchmakers, gunsmiths, blacksmiths, carpenters, cabinet makers, coopers, wagon makers, wheelwrights, harness and shoemakers, masons, tailors, hatters, painters, and bakers, 16 grocers, 22 merchants, and 8 innkeepers.